And during the Kennedy years, the Camelot clan used Eisenhower as a foil to reflect glory on their young and dynamic John Kennedy. And after all, it's harder than it looks. My students would all get this. You know, wouldn't you, if you were Kennedy's advance man, use Ike as the sort of counterpoise? So on the one hand, in 1954, Eisenhower and Mamie playing Scrabble, and I think that looks very pleasant and very lovely. But, you know, they had to work with this guy. So naturally, there was such a sharp contrast. And it worked against Eisenhower's memory and against the impression that was given to the public. By the time of his death on March 28, 1969, at the age of 78, the press seemed uninterested in Ike, and there was an obituary in Time magazine that concluded that Eisenhower was, quote, more of a figurehead than a president. That's what they said about him in Time in 1969. He was, quote, out of touch with his people. He was a great soldier, but he was judged a mediocrity, maybe even a failure as president. Well, starting in the 1980s, a great deal of classified information started to become available to scholars. If you go to Abilene, Kansas, and you work in the Eisenhower Library, you can read all kinds of wonderfully juicy details about the Eisenhower period. And this material showed quite a different Eisenhower. It showed that Eisenhower was deeply involved in government, deeply involved in the day-to-day operations of his National Security Council. On national security affairs, on foreign policy especially, he was a master of his brief. And he was he was deeply involved in the details of American national security issues. But the emphasis of the scholarship that started to come out, having read all this, was to attack Eisenhower for being a kind of evil genius. Look here, he had overthrown the government in Iran, and over here he'd overthrown the government in Guatemala. And what about Cuba? And what about the Congo? So suddenly we had a new branch of scholarship that depicted Ike as this kind of evil figure, whereas before it had been Eisenhower as a snooze-worthy kind of mediocrity. Well, this is history for you. The pendulum is constantly swinging, and if your head is swimming, I'm not surprised. You know, where's the real Eisenhower?